I'm going to start off this episode with a story. Something that I always tell people: you grow to love or hate about me is I always got a story. But this story starts when I first began as the head of school of a small Christian school in Johnson County, Missouri. And I was told by the board when I first started that there was a man in town in Warrensburg that I needed to get to know because he was a millionaire and he was constantly giving to the school. When I went to meet this guy, what I discovered was he was really just one of the sweetest people I'd ever met in my life. He was having a second bout with cancer and also taking care of his wife, who was suffering from dementia. I also learned that the previous principal before me had actually, in my opinion, taken advantage of him. Anytime she was in financial trouble, she would go to him and he would bail her out. When I left that meeting, I told the board, there's no way I will ever ask that guy for money. And I never did. And he quickly became a friend of mine. And I always sought after his counsel because he was clearly a brilliant businessman. All that money he had made on his own. And through the years that I knew him, even though I didn't ask him for money, he was always giving money to the school. Also, he had given money to a lot of the local ministries, including the prison ministry. He bought their first house for them, just paid for it in cash. And what they did with that house is when men would come out of prison, they would minister to them. They had a year-long program and they could stay in the house as long as they went through that program. As cancer started to really catch up with him, the prison ministry was wanting to open a second house for women. And he then put up a big chunk of money for that house, but essentially took out a mortgage for the remaining amount and vowed that he would continue to make that mortgage payment. And also said upon his passing that the church would then make that mortgage payment for him as well. The church he had gone to was regularly giving money to the prison ministry as well as the school through him. There was also a scholarship set up at that church for anybody that went to the school would receive $1,000 towards their tuition. But all of that was funded by that man, not the church. He just put it through the church. When he passed away, the first thing that I was told by many others is that don't expect to get any money at all from that church, that it was officially dried up. I was curious about that, so I went and talked to the head pastor to see if those funds were going to continue, because he left a giant chunk of money to the church. Before he had passed away, about 2 weeks before he had passed away, I was talking to him about kind of what his plans were, what he was looking forward to the most in heaven. And the two things that he told me was he's given most of his money to that church, and that the church was to take care of the school and the church was to take care of the prison ministry and all the other ministries that the church was taking care of. And as soon as he passed away, it just dried up. Now, the agreement that he made with the prison ministry is that the church would continue to make the mortgage payment. I never saw another penny come from the church. And it was told to me that there was literally millions that was left to them. When the prison ministry mortgage payments quit coming, he went to the church and asked them if they were going to continue the mortgage payments. And they said the only way they would make the mortgage payments was he had to give ownership of that ministry to them. And of course he said no. When the guy that runs the prison ministry was from prison, and when he was in prison, God told him to do this ministry. So of course he wasn't going to relinquish it to the church. So the church literally kept all of it. The school never got a penny. He never got a penny. Even though there was promises made, they completely broke all of those promises that they made that guy who fed millions into that church for years. And then who profited off of that were mostly the head pastors and the associate pastors. So I want to read this in Malachi. We read verse 11, where we talked about, regardless of whether God's leaving the churches, there will always be a remnant on this earth that worships the Lord. But we're going to pick it up in 12. I'm going to read the end of 11. For my name shall be great among the nations, says the Lord of hosts. But you profane it, in that you say, the table of the Lord is defiled, and its fruits, its food is contemptible. You also say, oh, what a weariness, and you sneer at it, says the Lord of hosts. And you bring the stolen, the lame, and the sick, thus you bring an offering. Should I accept this from your hand, says the Lord? But cursed be the deceiver, who has in his flock a male, and makes a vow, but sacrifices to the Lord what is blemished. For I am a great king, says the Lord of hosts. That's exactly what churches in America are doing, is they were taking the sacrifices of the altar, and they're making vows with these sacrifices, but they're not following through on their vows, and they're keeping it for themselves and only offering up the lame and the sick. The biggest church in my hometown, Lee Summit, has a $20 million a year budget. They give nothing to the community. All of that is consumed by the pastors. $20 million a year of sacrifices of the altar, completely consumed by a dozen or so men. It's really appalling. Seeing it firsthand, I've not seen much different other than that. And then on the flip side, there's tiny little churches that are, that I remember at the school we'd receive a check for like $63 from this tiny church every month faithfully, but that was a lot. That was their ministry. That was what they can afford. So I believe the more sacrifices that the church has, the more they're going to keep it, because if the sick and the lame were offered on the altar, then they sacrifice that to the Lord. That's a good offering, just like the widow who threw a penny in that Jesus talked about. But when they get this flock, when they get a giant sacrifice, of good sacrifice from the people, they consume it and they only offer up the sick and the lame. But cursed be the deceiver, who has in his flock a male, and makes a vow, but sacrifices to the Lord what is blemished. For I am a great king, says the Lord of hosts. So, it may feel like they're getting away with it, but they are absolutely cursed, and they're being cursed in this exact moment. And it may feel like they're rolling in the dough and rolling in the money, and they're building new buildings, and they're doing great, buying new clothes. And and the other piece of this is that it says, you also say, oh, what a weariness. They're acting like this is hard for them. All they do is put on a 45-minute show once a week, and they act like, oh, this is so hard, the weariness that I have, bringing in these millions and millions of dollars that are laid at the altar of the Lord to be food in his house, and all they do is consume it. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Put it in the comments below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support our channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.